Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another fascinating journey? Today, we're going deep inside, exploring the incredible voyage of oxygen through your body.
We'll be using Dr. Rasha Eldeeb's physiology handout as our guide.
So, get ready to trace oxygen's path from the air you breathe to the muscles that power your every move.
It's a story of incredible efficiency, adaptability, really, the amazing design of our bodies. We often take breathing for granted, but the mechanisms behind it are truly remarkable.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the basics. How does oxygen actually get from the air into our blood? I vaguely remember something about diffusion from school, something about molecules moving around.
You got it. Diffusion is the key. It's basically the movement of molecules from an area where they're highly concentrated to an area where they're less concentrated.
Okay, that rings a bell.
Think of it like this. Imagine dropping food coloring into a glass of water.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What happens?
It spreads out, right? That color slowly diffuses throughout the whole glass of water.
Precisely. And the same principle is at work with oxygen in your lungs. When you breathe in, there's way more oxygen in the air sacs of your lungs.
Those are the alveoli, right?
Exactly. The alveoli, compared to your bloodstream, there's a much higher concentration of oxygen in those alveoli. So naturally, oxygen molecules diffuse across a super thin membrane from the alveoli into the capillaries.
The capillaries, those tiny blood vessels surrounding the air sacs, right?
Yes, that's how oxygen gets into the blood.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's a thought. We always talk about getting oxygen in, but we also breathe out carbon dioxide. Does that use diffusion too?
Absolutely. Carbon dioxide moves by diffusion as well. But here's the interesting thing. It's much faster at it than oxygen.
Really? Why is that?
It's because carbon dioxide is much more soluble in blood than oxygen is. Think of it like dissolving sugar in water. It happens quickly and easily.
Right.
Oxygen, on the other hand, is a bit less eager to mix, you could say.
So even though we need oxygen more, CO2 is the diffusion superstar.
It really is.
Does that difference in speed actually matter?
It matters a lot. Because CO2 diffuses so efficiently, if there's a problem with diffusion in the lungs, it'll impact oxygen transfer long before CO2 is affected.
Huh.
So measuring CO2 levels, it's a crucial tool for doctors to detect any respiratory issues early on.
Wow, I never knew that little speed difference had such significant medical implications.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. It's a great example of how a seemingly simple concept like diffusion can have a massive impact on our health. Okay, but let's get back to that thin membrane you mentioned earlier. What makes this membrane so special?
It's a masterpiece of biological engineering, really. Imagine this. It's called the pulmonary membrane, and it's insanely thin, only about 0.6 microns.
Wow, how thin is that?
That's thinner than a single human hair.
Hold on, so something that thin is all that separates my blood from the air. It doesn't seem possible?
It might sound delicate, but it's remarkably efficient. Dr. Eldeeb's handout breaks it down. 6 distinct layers make up this membrane.
6 layers.
You've got a layer of fluid lining the alveoli, a substance called surfactant that helps keep those air sacs from collapsing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the walls of the alveoli and the capillaries themselves.
So it's a pretty complex structure for something so incredibly thin.
Exactly.
6 layers, that's like a microscopic layer cake for gas exchange.
I like that.
But you said this membrane is also huge.
That's right. Even though it's unbelievably thin, the total surface area of the pulmonary membrane in both your lungs is mind-blowingly large if you spread it all out.
Yeah.
It would be about the size of a tennis court.
A tennis court, seriously.
Yeah.
It's amazing how our bodies manage to pack so much functionality into such a compact space. It's really incredible. But okay, let's say the oxygen has successfully diffused across this amazing membrane. What happens next? Does it just float around in our blood until it reaches our muscles?
Well, not quite.
Mm-hmm.
That's where things get even more interesting. Oxygen's journey through the bloodstream isn't a solo trip. It relies on a special protein called hemoglobin, and that's where our story continues.
Right.
So now our oxygen, it's made it across that incredible pulmonary membrane. Quite a journey already.
A real feat of biological engineering, you said.
It is.
Right.
And here's the thing. Its journey's not over yet. Aren't even close. Now it's got a choice to make. 2 options, actually, for traveling through the bloodstream.
2 options. Interesting. Is this like choosing between, I don't know, a scenic route and a superhighway?
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Oh.
The first option is to just dissolve right into the blood plasma.
Okay.
But there's a catch. Only a tiny, tiny amount of oxygen can actually travel this way. It's kind of like trying to move a whole bunch of people one by one on bicycles.
Okay, so not very efficient then.
No, not at all.
What's the express option then for our oxygen travelers?
That's where hemoglobin steps in. It's the superstar of oxygen transport. Hemoglobin, it's this specialized protein. You find it inside our red blood cells.
Right, hemoglobin, I've heard of it.
And it has this amazing ability to bind to oxygen molecules.
Okay, so remind me, how does this all work?
Each hemoglobin molecule, think of it like a tiny, super efficient carpool.
Okay, yeah.
It can pick up and carry 4 oxygen molecules.
Wow, 4 passengers per trip. That's way better than our single-rider bicycles from before.
Way better.
So is that basically why we can function, and not just pass out from lack of oxygen every few steps we take because of hemoglobin?
You got it. Hemoglobin, it's crucial for making sure enough oxygen gets to our tissues, enough to meet all their energy demands. Without it, our blood just wouldn't be able to carry enough oxygen dissolved in the plasma alone. Just wouldn't cut it.
This is fascinating. So how does hemoglobin know when to pick up oxygen in the lungs and when to release it to the tissues? It must have some sort of internal guidance system, right?
That's where the oxygen dissociation curve comes in.
Yeah.
Now, I know the name sounds a bit intimidating.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's really just a visual way to represent how hemoglobin behaves, how it changes, depending on the oxygen levels around it.
A curve. Okay, so I'm thinking like a line graph or something. Hopefully not as complicated as those physics equations I still have nightmares about.
Nothing that scary, don't worry. Think of it like a graph that shows us the relationship between, well, the amount of oxygen that's available, we call that partial pressure, and how saturated hemoglobin is with oxygen. Basically, how full those tiny carpools we were talking about are.
So the higher the oxygen level, the more saturated hemoglobin becomes. Makes sense.
Exactly. And here's the thing, the shape of this curve, it's really interesting. It's an S shape.
An S, okay.
And that S shape, it tells us that hemoglobin doesn't bind oxygen in just a simple linear way.
Interesting. Why is that S shape so significant?
Well, at the lungs, right, where there's that high partial pressure of oxygen, the curve, it gets really steep.
Okay.
This means that hemoglobin binds to oxygen really, really tightly there. It makes sure to load up on as much oxygen as it possibly can before it heads out to the tissues.
So it's like those carpools eagerly filling all their seats right at the starting point.
Perfect analogy. But then, as that blood reaches the tissues, where the partial pressure of oxygen is lower because those cells are busy using it up the curve, it flattens out.
Oh, okay.
So now hemoglobin, it readily releases its oxygen right where it's needed the most.
Like those carpools happily dropping off their passengers at their destination.
Exactly.
So the shape of this curve, it reflects how hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, it changes depending on where it is, the environment it's in. That's a pretty amazing adaptation.
Amazing, right. And here's where it gets even more amazing. The curve, it isn't static. It can actually shift based on things like carbon dioxide levels, temperature, and even pH.
Wait, hold on. The curve can move. It's not fixed.
Nope, not fixed. If, for example, there's a buildup of carbon dioxide in the tissues, that's a signal they're working hard and need more oxygen.
Gotcha.
The curve, it shifts to the right, meaning that hemoglobin becomes even more generous with its oxygen delivery to the tissues.
So it's like the muscles are sending out an SOS and hemoglobin responds by loosening its grip on the oxygen, making it more available.
You got it.
Wow, I had no idea the oxygen dissociation curve could shift like that. I mean, that changes everything. So
Yeah.
our body can basically fine-tune oxygen delivery on the fly, just based on what the tissues need. Like a dynamic system always adjusting to meet demand.
Exactly. It's a fantastic example of how our bodies maintain such precise control over these essential processes. But, hemoglobin's not the only player in this intricate oxygen delivery system.
Oh, there's more?
There's more.
I'm all ears. Who else is part of this oxygen entourage?
Well, hemoglobin might be the star, the one handling the long-distance transport.
Yeah.
But there's another key player working behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Right there in the muscle's myoglobin. You can think of it as hemoglobin's cousin, kinda, but it's got its own very specialized role.
Myoglobin, right. So what's its specialty?
Myoglobin is like the muscle's own personal oxygen reserve. It's got an even stronger affinity for oxygen than hemoglobin does.
Really?
Yeah, meaning it binds that oxygen really tightly and holds on to it until it's absolutely needed, like really, really needed.
So it's like a high-security vault for oxygen, just ready to be opened when the muscles are under pressure.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And this super strong binding, it's what allows myoglobin to act as that temporary oxygen store, ready to be tapped into whenever muscle activity increases.
Incredible. So we have hemoglobin transporting oxygen all over the body, and then myoglobin standing by in the muscles, ready to provide an extra boost when it's really needed, like a two-tiered delivery system.
Precisely. And just like with hemoglobin, myoglobin also has its own dissociation curve.
It does.
Yeah, but its curve is much steeper.
Steeper. So what does that tell us about how myoglobin works?
Oh, the steepness of the curve.
Mhm.
It means that myoglobin, it only releases its oxygen when the oxygen levels in the muscle get really, really low. It's like it's holding onto that oxygen for dear life.
So it's a last resort reserve, only used when the muscles are really working at their absolute limit.
Pretty much.
It's amazing how these two proteins work together, how they make sure there's a constant oxygen supply.
It is, isn't it? But let's not forget about the amazing adaptations our bodies have developed to make that oxygen delivery even better, especially when we push ourselves.
You mean when we exercise?
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about that. I know my muscles, they definitely feel like they're screaming for oxygen when I'm working out. What's happening inside to meet that increased demand?
Okay, so first of all, your cardiac output, it goes way up.
Cardiac output, that
That's the amount of blood your heart pumps every minute. Your heart rate increases, and it pumps with more power with every single beat. So it's sending this surge of oxygen-rich blood all throughout your body.
wow, so it's like our heart becomes a super pump during exercise.
It's an incredible transformation, and it gets even more impressive. Your body actually redirects blood flow, prioritizing delivery of that oxygen-rich blood to the muscles that are working the hardest. It temporarily reduces flow to other less active areas.
So it's all about efficiency, making sure that oxygen gets to where it's needed the most.
Exactly.
What about hemoglobin, though? Does it change how it works during exercise, too?
Absolutely. Remember that oxygen dissociation curve we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, during exercise, there are all these factors that come into play, and they cause that curve to shift to the right.
Okay.
Increased CO2 levels, higher temperatures in the muscles, and those changes in pH. All of those are signals to hemoglobin that it's time to be even more generous with its oxygen.
So it's like, again, the muscles are sending out that SOS, and hemoglobin's responding by letting go of oxygen more easily, making it even more available.
You got it.
It really is a beautifully coordinated dance between the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, and those amazing oxygen-carrying proteins, isn't it?
It really is.
They all work together to make sure the increased oxygen demands of exercise are met. It's truly amazing how adaptable our bodies are. But you know what's even more mind-blowing to me? The fact that babies who haven't even taken their first breath, they have their own special system for getting oxygen.
You're talking about fetal hemoglobin.
Yeah.
It's an incredible adaptation. It's what lets developing babies thrive even in a low oxygen environment.
Exactly. So how does this fetal hemoglobin differ from the kind that we have as adults?
Well, fetal hemoglobin, it has an even higher affinity for oxygen than adult hemoglobin. It binds oxygen so much tighter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it can efficiently extract oxygen from the mother's blood, even when those oxygen levels are relatively low.
So it's like fetal hemoglobin has like superpowers, grabbing onto oxygen with an iron grip.
It's essential for survival in the womb. This
Mm.
adaptation, it makes sure the developing fetus receives a steady supply of oxygen. It's crucial for their growth and development.
All of this, it's just incredible. It's amazing to realize how much complexity is involved in something as seemingly simple as breathing. We've traveled from the air we inhale, through that intricate dance of diffusion and the remarkable world of oxygen-carrying proteins, all the way to the muscles that power every move we make.
And we've seen how our bodies adapt and fine-tune this whole process, whether we're at rest, exercising, or even, before we're even born. It's a real testament to the incredible power and efficiency of human physiology.
It really is mind-boggling, isn't it? All of this is happening inside us right now, and we don't even have to think about it.
I know, really.
From that first breath of air to the, that intricate dance of diffusion across a membrane, thinner than we can even imagine, to the incredible teamwork of hemoglobin and myoglobin.
Just shuttling oxygen all over our bodies, it's incredible.
It's like, it makes you realize, how much we take for granted.
It really does.
It really is a testament to the power of, well, I guess, evolution, right? And just the sheer elegance of, how our bodies are designed. We've seen how these systems, they all work together seamlessly, adapting to all sorts of demands, from that low oxygen environment in the womb,
Right.
to the intense needs of, well, when we're exercising, really pushing ourselves.
And to think, we've just focused on oxygen's journey.
Right.
There are so many other processes happening inside us every second of every day.
Oh, I know.
Just as complex and fascinating as this one. Makes you wonder what other secrets our bodies are hiding, just waiting for us to uncover them.
I know. It makes you want to learn more, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
This deep dive, it's just scratched the surface, really, of human physiology. It's like, an invitation to keep exploring.
Keep asking questions.
Keep being curious and just marveling at this incredible machine we call the human body. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like a newfound appreciation for every breath I take.
You too,
It's not
Doc.
just air, right? It's like the fuel that powers every cell in our bodies.
It's a reminder to never take breathing for granted. Each breath, it's like a testament to, well, I guess to life itself, to its incredible resilience, how adaptable it is.
Well said. So to all our deep divers out there, we hope this exploration has, made you a little bit more curious about the world within. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the wonders of science. Until next time, keep breathing.